Is it spring already? Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. It's been a while. Winter is usually kind of a slow season for me. I don't have a heated workspace or really much space to work outside. This winter's been kind of odd and I'm really enjoying it. Last year we set a record for over 100 inches of snow. And granted, winter's not done yet, but this year we have like no snow. That's about it. So I figured, it's supposed to be about 45 degrees today, which also is unseasonably warm. It's usually well below zero this time of year. I figured we may as well start getting ready for spring by taking a look at some of the riders that I have and see what we can work on. So this one is more or less the most complete that I have. They all need work. I think I have 11 right now that are just waiting to get worked on. But this one is in the best overall shape. And all winter long, I thought it was a Husqvarna, but it's a Scott's. As you can see, I don't know anything about it. I got it for free. Here's the model number. The 46572X8. And just doing a cursory search online, apparently this is a Murray product, and they don't make parts anymore, and I couldn't even find any parts on eBay that were, genuine or original. There's some aftermarket, generic stuff like oil filter and whatnot, but like this side cowl is missing. That I'm not going to be able to get, I don't think. And this front panel's missing, so that I don't think I'm going to be able to get. The seat is it's not great, but it's also not the worst I've seen. It needs a battery and no key, and it looks like the ignition switch is all wallowed out, so we might just replace that with a generic ignition. I was looking underneath the hood, just trying to figure out if there was like an easy, pigtail disconnect for that ignition switch, and I don't see anything, so I don't know. I'm not quite sure how that goes together. It's right way in the back there where that orange wire is. So I'll have to pop that out and see if those just disconnect at the switch itself or if there's an ignition. Looks like we got a little snake skin here. Garter snake. Overall it looks dirty, but oh, that could be a problem. Why did I pick this one? Huh. Well, I guess we should look at that first. No spinning. Fuel tank is completely empty, so that's good. Looks pretty clean in there too. Oil. Got oil. I'll wipe it and do a more accurate test here once I have both hands free. But yeah, tires, I did put air in them just to move. Back ones seem okay. Front ones are cracked on the sidewall. I think maybe it was the other one that was cracked. Both of the front ones were flat, and I put air in it to move, but I'm not suspecting that it's going to hold. Which is kind of a shame because the tread on these is pretty good. These look like good tires. They're the Carlisle. but they're just dry rot from sitting. So I'm gonna pop in the stand. Looks like there's a little bit of an oil leak here. Not quite sure what's going on there. It's all wet all around here. But let's dig into it. I'm pretty sure when I picked this up, I was able to turn it over. But yeah, it's a little bit. But it's turning the it's turning the brake. It must have had the brake on. That's weird. I'm gonna, let's see here. Where's the plug hole? Over here. Let's pop the plug out. We can put some oil down in there just to help lubricate the piston so we're not tearing up the walls. We gotta go get a plug socket and be right back. I should mention too, it's not like cold, but it's like, you know, spring cold. So I do have a case of the sniffles. I'm sure that's going to be super annoying, and I apologize. I will try to do my best to edit out as many sniffles as I can, but please forgive me. What do I got going on here? I see a lot of goobers coming out with it. This spider web plug looks really good. So I'm just going to take some light oil and attempt to shoot it in the plug hole. I can see. Not a whole lot. It's going to burn off. But we just want to help it turn over a little bit. That's already helping. It sounds like the PTO is engaged. Is that off or on? That's on. I always default to saying PTO, but this has got a manual mechanical deck engagement lever. So I don't know why. It's easier for me to just say PTO, I guess. You know what I meant. The deck engagement device. It's still, I wonder why in the world this deck belt is awfully tight. Can you see what I'm looking at? This deck belt is kind of tight. It's like it's engaged, but that's because it doesn't really do much. I gotta look underneath here. So what direction? I can't even see. How about on the other side? I'll give you guys a look here after I figure this out. Well, that should be. That doesn't even matter because it's not moving. It's all seized into place. So I wonder if we're fighting. there's just a lot of drag from the belts. I think best bet would be to pop those off, both the drive belt and the deck belt. That way we can get a good look at, just how free the engine is. I like to get as much resistance out of the way as possible, but if this is locked into place and seized, I might have a hard time getting those off. Let me think here. So this is the part where I realized that my microphone had apparently shut off, which is kind of a bummer, but there's no audio for the next few minutes, so I'm going to try to do a voiceover narration just to explain the things that I was trying to tell you guys. I ended up taking the whole deck off, which wasn't too bad. It was just 4 cotter pins on the draft arms, and the whole deck slid off. It was just easier, and to be honest, it had to come off anyways because I wanted to assess the condition of the deck, planning for the event that we're going to get this thing running. The deck will be the next step. So normally when there's this much debris sitting on the deck like that, I would expect some rust holes. It just traps the moisture in and eats away the deck. So I was happy that it was generally in good condition. Some of the spindles appear to be seized, whether or not that's just drag from the blades underneath the deck or if it's actually corroded or seized, that remains to be seen. But for the most part, like, the deck itself is the major problem. I can probably clean up these spindles and get them functioning again, or I might have some replacement parts. So I'm not super concerned with that at the moment, just doing a cursory look here since we got it off the machine. And with that off, we can kind of just continue with doing our engine assessment and going over the whole machine altogether. Next, we want to get the side cowl off. I'm still trying to figure out the best axis to get at this starter solenoid because we don't have any crank on the engine yet, and I'm suspecting the solenoid is going to be an issue, so that's the next step. After the cowl is just held on by a couple spring clips, it's no big deal. It comes right off, and to be honest, I'm kind of considering leaving it off just because we're missing the one on the other side anyways, and so it might look better with them both missing, I guess. I don't know, I haven't decided yet, but for the time being it can come off just so we can look at getting better access to the solenoid and the starter itself. If we want to jump the starter, we have access to it with the cowl off. So I'm taking a look here, trying to figure out exactly the condition of the solenoid, how best to access it, and kind of go from there. I was trying to get you guys in here to see exactly what I'm talking about with the solenoid itself. This is a simple, standard 3-post solenoid. So the base of the solenoid grounds onto the frame of the lawnmower. And so there's a post for the battery cable, a post for the starter cable, and then there's a little prong for the start signal, which comes from the ignition switch. All of those terminals have to be clean, clear of corrosion, so that way they can transmit the electrical signal. And so at this point I'm thinking, you can see right now there's some rust and corrosion on the posts. So I don't know yet if it's just it needs to be cleaned or if it just needs to be replaced. But the good news with the solenoid is that an aftermarket generic solenoid will do the trick. There's nothing special about a solenoid, so you can get those at any Napa or O'Reilly's or anything like that. I think I paid like $11 for a new one, which I did end up replacing this one, and I'll show you here in a minute. But I'm kind of demonstrating or attempting to demonstrate how my remote trigger switch works. We can kind of bypass the key switch since we don't have the ignition switch or the key for the ignition switch, and we don't even know the condition of the ignition switch itself. So the best way to bypass that is with a remote trigger switch. It'll send a signal and jump the solenoid. And it's actually not even that bad that I'm trying to do this voiceover, because the tripod fell over when I was showing you that, and I had to kind of go over it and explain it again. But this is with the solenoid out of the machine. It's just held on by those two bolts that mount it to the frame. But you can see the two posts here. It is not, polarity doesn't matter on this type of solenoid, so it doesn't matter which post goes to which cable. All it is there's a metallic bar underneath these posts, and when it gets energized by an electromagnet, it'll draw up that bar up to complete the electric circuit, so that way power can be transferred from one post to the other. In this case, it would the signal would allow power to be drawn across from the battery to the starter motor, completing the circuit as if it was one uninterrupted cable going from the battery directly to the starter. In this one, you can see that the left post it's bent, and it's also kind of melted along the plastic there, so it's either shorted or it's damaged in some respect. So it might work, but most likely it doesn't. And even if it did work, I'd be concerned that there's an internal short due to the melting and arcing. So I did order a new solenoid, and like I said, it's, in terms of doing a repair, this is about as cheap and easy as they get, so no problem there. And this is just a brief overview of how the remote trigger works. The larger cable goes onto the battery side of the solenoid, which is important because you have to have power going to the remote trigger. And then the smaller cable goes to the signal side, or that signal post. And so when you depress the trigger on the remote, it completes the loop from power from the battery side on the this is hard to explain. The remote acts like the ignition switch, so it triggers the signal side, which activates the electromagnet and operates as if you were cranking the engine. So it completes the loop in lieu of the ignition switch. Now, the remote trigger that I have is kind of junky. I got it off Amazon and I need to replace it. It doesn't work the greatest, but in theory, I like the idea of using a remote trigger. You'll see guys either arc across the terminals of the solenoid with like a wrench or a screwdriver or something like that. But you can actually arc weld it together. You can damage whatever tool you're going to be using. And I typically don't like to damage my tools on purpose, so I like using this. It's just a little bit of an extra safety factor, and it gives me more control over the actual electrical impulse. So when I'm testing, I like to use this remote. In this case, I'm running directly from the battery to the starter lead, so I'm bypassing the solenoid altogether, and the remote gives me the ability to interrupt the signal. It only works when I depress the switch. So this way I can test the actual starter motor, and you can see that it's spinning. So that's a good thing. As far as the start system, the starter motor is one of the more costly repair components. So in order to eliminate that as a potential source of a problem that needs to be fixed, I like to just do a simple test here like this, just to confirm that it's spinning, that it's not grounding out anywhere, and it kind of just eliminates that as a potential problem source. And it's a simple test, it's a couple seconds. So using a jumper pack with this remote, we can test the different components, both the starter, the solenoid, etc. You have to change kind of the functionality of how you're using the trigger. Attach it to different points in the electrical system. But then that gives you the opportunity to isolate the different components and test them individually, so you can figure out exactly where the fault or the problem is. Like we already demonstrated, the solenoid is clearly bad. A visual inspection would have just confirmed that, but this is just a nice. It's nice for me to have like a systematic approach when I'm doing some kind of repair. Even though I have a suspicion that the solenoid is bad, I'm still going to go ahead and test it like I always do, so that way I know I'm not missing a step in my diagnostic process. So at this point, we've confirmed that we need a ignition switch. We know that we need a new solenoid, and we know that the starter's good. So other than that, there's not a whole lot that we can really test until we get those new components in. We can run a multimeter and confirm that we have voltage going through, or at least continuity going through all the different cables, just to make sure that there's no grounds or anything like that. And I was gonna try to do a spark test, and so I was kind of just looking at the different parts, um, kind of figuring out what I could do while I waited for the new components to come in. And I started thinking, well, I should check the air filter, and it's always important, especially if it's an unknown machine, or if you're working on a machine for somebody else, because you don't know how long it's been sitting out. It's very common to get um, rodents to build nests, mice, squirrels, whatnot. They like to build their nests up underneath the cowls and the shrouds of these machines. And this is an air-cooled engine. It relies on the fan to draw air in, and also the shroud kind of disseminates that air and directs it over the fins on the engine, and that's how it's cooled. So if those fins are blocked with debris and nesting material, it'll quickly overheat, and you can throw a rod, you can spin a bearing, you can even more or less explode the cylinder block. At the very least, you can seize the piston. I mean, all sorts of damage. So it's a simple check just to make sure, pop the shroud off, look for any debris, blow it out with some compressed air, and then you can just cross that off for problems that you're potentially avoiding. So just continuing a walk around, still doing a kind of a diagnostic, getting a feel for this machine. I don't know what kind of interlocks are on here. There's obviously a safety interlock that somebody tried to bypass with some tape, and it also looks like the wires going to the interlock are cut, or I can't imagine that it works because one, it's kind of confusing. Normally it's a simple loop, there's power and ground, but this interlock has a few extra wires, I guess. You can see the one that's severed, but there's also a bullet connector, which I can't figure out what that would go for or go to, especially on the same circuit, unless there's like a neutral position sensor on the transmission. I guess that could be it. There might be a brake interlock that could be generally in the main cowl. Usually it has a lever to depress to sense that you have the brake engaged in order to start the machine. And in general, I'm trying to get a feel for the wiring schematic because I don't have the diagram for this machine. I couldn't even find a parts manual. It seems like the yellow cables are more or less for the interlocks, and purple is for the headlights. Red is obviously power going to different components. So I just realized that my mic was off, probably for the whole video. So there might not be any audio, and if there is, it might be kind of poor. So I apologize for that. I got the jumper pack hooked up again, and because the battery cable was disconnected and the solenoid is missing, that's my jumper pack beeping. I connected it right to the fuse, which goes to the ignition switch, so we can test the fuse. And I just want to see if we have power going to the dash. And since I don't have the original key, we'll just use a good old John Deere from a different mower. That's good. It's got power completing. I'm sure all those lights are everything's okay. Diagnostic dash, or more likely, everything needs to be repaired. So that works. I can shut off this beep. I still don't think we can test for spark. Well, for one, the ignition switch is not turning all the way over, but I gotta figure, I don't know which lead it's gonna be that goes to the coil. One of these is probably that oil sensor, because I think there was, let me just check this again. I thought there was an oil light. It says PTO, service, fuel, battery. I wonder if that one is oil pressure or oil level. I don't know. But that's kind of weird that some of the lights went out. So that's not the greatest without the right key. I wonder, what we should do is probably just pop this ignition switch out and just see what we're even dealing with. All right, so I want to get that ignition switch out. But first, I think I'm going to take out the fuel tank because it's in my way. A lot of times there's like a little, not really a nut, but a retaining nut that holds the backside of the ignition switch on, and I can't get up in there to see if there is one. So I'm just going to move the fuel tank out of the way, which I probably should have done to begin with. It would have made getting the solenoid out a whole lot easier. Are you on? Yes. So hopefully this will just slide out of here once I get these few screws out. Try not to strip out the plastic threads too. This is usually what ends up happening is start out with something simple and it progresses and progresses until half the machine has been disassembled. But that's okay. What size are you gonna be? 3/8 maybe? Where did I put that? That is also my hood retainer. Was that gonna go flying? Kind of wobbly. I've got, there's a fuel sender in here, which is kind of cool. Let it come out. Yep. Now this can just go over here somewhere, like so. And so here's, you see, since I'm not sure what got caught on the solenoid removal, this would have been way better. Solenoid sat here. You can see the two holes that it was bolted down. This is the battery lead coming in here. The starter is on the other side because I was messing with it with the jumper pack, but that was over here. Oh, we got an escapee going for it. Starter motor was on this side, so 2 posts, and then the trigger switch. There's ground for the ignition, and the trigger switch was here. So orange and blue. Orange, that must go to the, I'm not sure, but it looks like blue is going up to the, where's that going? The only blue I see is going to the dash up there. I thought that would have been the ignition, but that's going up there. So maybe that wasn't the signal wire. It'd be kind of cool if this just unplugged. It kind of looks like it might. But it also looks kind of cruddy. Hey, what do you know? Yeah, we got a little bit of corrosion on here. Those will have to get cleaned up. And like I said, I don't know which ones are for what. Wire looks like it's for the safe, or wire. Yellow looks like it's for the safety interlock. And there's another interlock here. Right there, this guy right there, and that is for the deck engagement. So it will not start when the deck is engaged. That'll interrupt power because this paddle pushes the button, or vice versa. I'm not sure yet. One way or the other. That's kind of interesting. There's a button with a decal of a finger pushing it. For what? I don't know. Some kind of a reset. These purple lines that go to it. One goes to the light, and the other goes to the dash. So it must just be like a reset for the lights, or I don't know. Interesting. There's some homemade, well, not homemade, but generic electrical connectors. Let's see here. I want to get power to the coil so that way I can spin it over and test for spark. And I also want to get that ignition switch out because I want to replace that. You know how sometimes you think you're smart and then you get humbled pretty quickly? Well, this is one of those times. Let me show you. Looking around on here, trying to figure out where the coil draws power from. And I'm looking at these two going, man, which one is it? And I'm trying to trace it back to the ignition switch, and it's like, well, there's red and black and yellow. Why? What are these two for? One is for the coil. What's the other one for? And then I looked over, and right in front of me, there's another spark plug wire because this is a twin cylinder engine, and with two cylinders comes two spark plugs. So now we can get this one out and check it. And then this one's kind of wet. Probably from that oil we put. Oh no, we put it in the other side. But I mean, it's still good condition. That's real good. So I'm not too worried about that. But I got to figure out how I'm going to get power to test. I mean, I could disconnect each one of these here and get power to the individual coils. It's a bullet connector, so I got to get a small jumper that would go in there. It would be a lot easier if the key switch worked. Oh, I'm probably way overthinking this. If I just bump the starter over fast enough, that should give me spark. But I can't because my jumper's dead. So I think it's getting pretty muddy. Everything's thawing out and my boots are full of mud. So I think I'm going to wrap up here for now. We know it turns over. I still haven't gone through the carb or anything like that. So that's going to need to be addressed. That appears, oh, fuel pump, it's under the air cleaner. So I'm gonna take the air cleaner, the air box, and probably I'll just do the whole cover at the same time. Do that, adjust the fuel system. I gotta look for an ignition switch, clean out this plug end, and then I think that's probably it for now. Oh, solenoid too. So solenoid and a switch. That's what I need. But yeah, it's like I said, it's getting pretty muddy back here, and I just wanted to get out and work for a little bit. So just try to get back into the hang of things, and once I get started, then it's a little bit easier for me to continue. So with that, I'm going to sign off. But hopefully, we'll get working on this again here as long as the weather stays like it's been. So if you have any questions or comments, please let me know in the comment section below. And until next time, thanks for watching.